Honestly, a BooBoo Dude is anyone who's treating you like you don't deserve to be treated. And that's a broad spectrum, obviously. It can go anywhere from you're just not getting the communication you deserve to toxic, this is straight up abusive, you got to get out kind of thing. So it is a wide range, but at the core, it's someone who is leaving you on red, leaving you wondering where you stand as a manipulation tactic, or leaving you on the back burner.
I believe every single person has a ministry. Ministry isn't just for preachers and it's not just for pastors. It's the way you shine the light that God gave you through His Spirit in all spaces that He's trusted you to walk. That means you on your college campus. That means you at your corporate job. That means you in high school. That means you with your friends at the bar or the restaurant. That means you wherever you are. You have the responsibility to shine God's light in that space, and you get the chance to. Friend, you are beautiful, you are worthy, and you are made to shine. Fam, and welcome back to another episode of the Made to Shine show. I am so tickled excited right now because I have someone who I didn't even know this, but is really close to where my sister went to college in Louisiana, which we just figured out before this, which is awesome. But I was telling her before this, I've been stalking her for a while now, and her energy, her light is just so amazing. She is an author of 2 amazing books, The Enneagram for Teens, Don't Date a BooBoo Dude, which, hello, that title, come on, we're going to spend a lot of time there. But she also is a podcast host, an amazing wife and mom. We have the beautiful, amazing Ainsley Britain on with us today. Ainsley, thank you to the show.
Thank you for having me. What an honor. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on. It really is, it's so funny because I always say, you don't know exactly the energy of someone before you hop on a podcast. It's kind of like we've scheduled this conversation. We will be speaking for this long, but I know your platform, but I don't know you. But then you hop on and the pre-room or whatever, and immediately it's just like, oh, I love this girl. I could, and I think we did talk for 10 minutes before we hopped on. But all that to say, I really am so excited. You have such an awesome just energy and spirit. And I'm excited for today's conversation. I was telling you this before, but the mission of this show is to remind every single person you got a ministry. It's not just for preachers and pastors. It's the way you shine God's light in all spaces you hold. And Ainsley, I've seen you do that online from afar, now from up close, just between being a mom and a wife. You're an author, you're a podcast host. You're doing so many things and shining God's light in all. So excited to have you on. But before we dive into what a BooBoo Dude is, we're going to spend lots of time there. But before we dive into that, tell us, kick us off with what is your favorite quote and why? That's how we kick off the show.
Ooh, favorite quote. Oh my gosh, that is such a great question. So what's actually funny, I don't even know if I can think of one off the bat, but I literally yesterday was painting this art for my daughter's room, and I was laughing because I was for some reason, I don't know why it brought me back to high school. And I was I used to have a book of quotes, would type them out on Microsoft Word and print them out. And
it was your book.
It was oh yeah, I created this book of quotes just that I collected off
I need this book.
The internet.
I love that.
Or Instagram and Pinterest and whatever. I couldn't do anything, but I could put it as my aim away status for these quotes. You know what? The quote that I feel I say often is don't date a BooBoo Dude. I really think that's some of my favorite quote and biggest piece of advice for anyone younger than me or anyone single.
We will receive that. We will receive that as your favorite quote because even as we were talking about this, one, I love that title. I've never heard the term BooBoo Dude, but what I love about that is even recently I've been speaking with so many younger girls and the power of influence in relationships and who you date. I think we put so much emphasis, especially in Christian culture, on who you marry is so important. But in hindsight, even I've been in different types of relationships and or with different, some great guys, some not so great guys. And it's the power, the influence of who you date is also so important. And so I love how your title is don't date a BooBoo Dude. I'm going to have to say that right. Don't date a BooBoo Dude because It's like, I think if like a church wrote that, it would be don't marry a BooBoo Dude. But
Yeah.
dating is so important. And so I want to start there. Like, what is a BooBoo Dude?
Yeah.
Like, let's start there. And how do you know if you're dating a BooBoo Dude?
That is the best question. Honestly, a boo dude is anyone who's treating you like you don't deserve to be treated. And that's a broad spectrum, obviously. It can go anywhere from you're just not getting the communication you deserve to toxic, this is straight up abusive, you got to get out kind of thing.
Mm.
So it is a wide range, but at the core, it's someone who is leaving you on red, leaving you wondering where you stand as a manipulation tactic, or leaving you on the back burner.
Interesting. And I love what you said because again, that's a wide range. You have, and I think we start putting processes and like we have those conversations going on in our head, starting to excuse behavior. Like,
Totally.
well, they left us on red, but I was a little too much. So I get why they left me on red.
Right.
Or like even I've done this before in relationships where it's like, okay, I don't really know where I stand with this person, but I might be too much knowing where I want them to stand. It might be too forward. And so talk to me about like, what is that? I guess, what are those thought processes you think that lead us into potentially getting into relationships with boo-boo dudes or like guys
Yeah.
that lead us to staying in those relationships or being in those relationships in the first place? Like, what's the internal conversation?
Absolutely. So I think, and I can definitely speak to my personal experience, which is the book, but I literally went through when I was writing it, all of the guys that I dated. And I was a very casual dater. I wasn't someone who like always had to have a boyfriend, but I also wasn't someone who like I would just date a guy for, and I don't even know if dating would be, the term. It was never anything really serious until I got into this very serious relationship that ended up to be toxic and abusive. And that's later on in the story. But what I noticed is I would not have gotten to that point had I not settled in little ways with these other
Mm,
relationships that came before.
that's
So,
good.
seemingly innocent example is this guy in high school. He was a guy that I would like hang out with. My dad lived out of town. Whenever I would go visit my dad, I just had such a crush on this guy and we talked and whatever. And he was like, well, you can come hang out if you want. And that one phrase, if you want, is a red flag. That's
Yeah.
not that's not a warm invitation. Like, hey, I would love to see you. You want to go for lunch? Like, that's not it. So
Okay, that's good. That's good. Wait, I want to, because like explain, I think we need to explain why that's a red flag.
mm,
Because like, and I'll play devil's advocate here because I hear this. It's like, yeah, but they're saying like that is an open invitation. Like if I want, I do want. So like you know what I mean? But like, so why is that a red flag? What does that point to?
I think that for me, whenever I'm looking back, especially specifically in this scenario, it was not him pursuing me. And I think that that's one of the things that's lower on the spectrum of boo boo dude, right? That's like just a little ick. It's just a little ugh. Like,
Yeah.
man, it doesn't build my confidence.
Mm,
Going over there or, driving over there to go see him would not have made me feel confident. It would have made me a little bit delusional and probably building up what I want out of that relationship, but not the reality of what it is.
that's good.
I think that that's kind of the route. And then when I got there, because of course, I did that. I wanted to hang out with him. Of course. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Let's hang out. Like, I was so excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I get over there and he played video games. And I literally just sat there and watched him play video games on the couch. And I was like, this is so ridiculous. For me, quality time is one of my love languages. So I still felt like I was getting like attention or some type of love because I was just there in his presence. But
Yeah.
he did not give me 1 ounce of attention. He could not have cared less if I was there, if I was not there. The if you want was not, hey, I want to see you. It
Mhm.
was, if you want to see me, you can come sit on my couch and watch me play video games. And that is, it is on the lower end. Like, he wasn't abusive, he wasn't toxic, but I didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve to be ignored. And that's boo boo.
That's boo-boo. Okay,
That's
that's boo-boo. And I love this. So I want to go along the lines of the spectrum because I think we're
uh-huh.
speaking to people that are in all these spectrums. And so I think about this level of boo-boo. This is
Mhm.
like maybe a 2 out of 10. You know, like not a massive boo-boo, but you know, a little sprinkle of boo-boo dude in there. But I think what's so powerful is this conversation of pursuit is so hot nowadays. It's
Yeah.
like, what does it mean? Can the girl pursue first? Does it have to always be the guy? Is it old school? If it's always the guy or I don't know, whatever have you. And so I'm curious for you, like what pursuit looks like healthy wise in a dating relationship? Because I think about like, okay, a lot of girls would say, yeah, like maybe he isn't pursuing me, but that's so old school. Like I want him to know, like, I'm okay asking him out. I'm okay taking the first shot. And like, I'm with like I so believe like if a guy wants to spend time with you, he will find a way. Like you know what I mean? He will find a way. There is no excuse in the book that's going to stop him from seeing you and spending time with you. So talk to me about that, like the dance of pursuit and kind of like what you've seen with when it comes to a boo-boo dude, like little warning signs that like maybe you're doing too much of the pursuit as a girl or not.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I think the number one thing I'm trying to find, I have like this list in the book of, well, I have a quiz that's like, are you dating a boo-boo dude?
Which okay, every girl needs to take.
Yes.
All of the boyfriends through the boo-boo dude test.
Exactly. And of course, I'm not going to find the page that I'm looking for, but I know that like one of the things, even when we're talking about pursuing, I think there is some value to showing a guy you value them, but I think that that's a supernatural thing for girls to do. I think we naturally,
Yeah.
like if we value the relationship, we're available. We are good at communication. Typically, it is pretty general, but we can also tell if a guy is into us or not. We just,
Yeah.
deep
You
down,
know. I
you
so
know.
believe that. You know if a guy likes you or not.
You do. And the thing is like, again, like if you want to go pay every other date or something because you want equal value or whatever, okay. But do you feel confident when you leave his presence that you know where you stand with him?
Yeah.
Because if you don't, that's boo boo. If
Mm.
you are hearing rumors through the grapevine, but you're like, oh, I choose to not believe that. And I'm not going to ask him about it. I'm not going to get clarification because I don't want to believe it. La 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 la. You're not doing yourself a service, and you're not going to be able to be pursued well and in a healthy way if you can't face what's actually happening versus what you want to happen. So there's this
Mm.
song from Daniel Bradbury called Potential, and she basically says, I'm in love with your potential. And I'm not in love with you, I'm in love with your potential. If
Wow.
you can honestly say that's where you are, that's boo boo.
That's boo-boo.
That's boo boo.
That's good. My pastor once said it this way. He was like, you need to look at someone's patterns, not their promises,
Totally.
because or their patterns, not their potential. Because and I even think too, like guys especially, what I've just noticed, I think a lot of this comes with maturity. Like I was in a couple serious relationships like in high school and then in college. And now that I'm in my upper school 20s, if you will, I do think that you like guys, it takes them a little while to mature. But
Yes.
you know, all that to say, what I just noticed looking back is there was so much potential there. And I think that's what my heart was like out. Like I saw that and there was moments where I saw that come to pass. It wasn't like it was all promises and not any patterns. Like there were some amazing things, but the crux of it was like, yeah, I felt like I was always second guessing myself. And I felt like,
Mhm.
you want a future with me? Like I felt these questions that they didn't really have answers to. And so you kind of just go into this place of it's fine. It's not a bad relationship. It's not abusive, but there's also not clarity. It's
Right.
like the cul-de-sac of dating. And you think about, Ben Stewart talks about this, but like Christian, like God doesn't talk about necessarily dating in the Bible, but he talks a lot about evaluation and like dating. I think what's so confusing about it is the whole premise of dating is really to figure out like, is this person going to be a good spouse or not? Like, it's not a place you sit. It's kind of a process you go through. And in high school, that can be hard. And college, like you don't know. And so I'm curious what you think about that. Like with high school or dating, sometimes I struggle with like, how to talk to high school girls who are like, I mean, I'm not looking for my husband. I like this guy. It's not great, but it's not bad, but I don't think it's going anywhere. Do I break up with them? What do I do? Like, they're borderline boo-boo, but it's not abusive. Like, what would you tell that girl?
Honestly, I would be like, if you don't see this going anywhere, and if you aren't looking for your husband, hey, you're wasting your time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
then just be friends and
Yeah.
spend time with your girls, because he's not going to be at your wedding, but the girls in your group might be. So invest
That'll
in,
preach.
like,
Yeah.
you're wasting your time. You're wasting his time. And what if he's not on the same page? You're wasting his heart if he's more into it than you are, or not wasting his heart, but you're taking advantage of his heart whenever, if he's, more invested than you are. And
Yeah.
if he's not, again, what void are you trying to fill with just spending time with someone that is not going anywhere? It's for me, it was an attention void, because I did that. I did that exact thing. I was like, I don't know. I'm just really liking the attention. I really like having someone to text
Well,
whenever I want. What was missing was that attention from the Lord and that deeper relationship with the Lord. And
hmm,
so if I could tell them anything, of course it's all of that stuff, but I
so good.
would say, hey, there's a void there that I totally experience and I understand, but really it can be so fulfilling and so valuable with a relationship with the Lord. And if you can just bring that attention or that insecurity, whatever's keeping you there, to the throne room, I think you will find so much restoration, so much healing that you didn't even realize that you needed, because you
Mm,
felt like you were fine. Everything was
that's
fine.
so true.
But really, that's what is going on behind the
Yeah.
scenes, and behind that lack of self awareness that is so hard to have when you're in high school. Let's just be honest.
Oh,
But if I could
so
just tell
hard.
you that, if I could tell younger me that, I would
Mhm.
be like, quit wasting your time and go hang out with the girls. And even though those girls
Mhm.
can be, I'm speaking specifically when I was in high school, it was really hard female friendships. They weren't easy. They weren't drama free. It wasn't like that. But I still wish that I would have learned more about friendship than failed relationships, because those failed
Mm,
relationships didn't get me anywhere but into the arms of the next settling. But if I would have learned about hard friendships and how to repair friendships, that would have served me in the long run.
mm. That's so good. I think about too, like, the whole essence of I've been listening to, do you know Dwell, like the app Dwell, where you
Yeah.
listen to scripts?
Yeah.
Okay, love Dwell. So I've been like
Yeah.
midday power walk, we're turning Dwell on. But just like it was talking about like divorce and like, if her husband dies, like who she's married to in heaven. And I was listening to that scripture. But I think what's so cool to think about is like, I really do think like Adam and Eve, like God designed us to marry one person, like to be with one person. But you think about dating as a concept is it's a relatively new thing. They
Mhm.
didn't have dating. Like even, I mean, I don't know about my grandparents dated, but before like my great grandparents, like you did like very young, you met somebody and then you married, or you were in arranged marriage, like dating and getting to choose, it's kind of this new construct. And with that, I think comes its new level of difficulty. But even looking back, I love what you said about like any time invested in a relationship that isn't gonna last forever is time taken away from an investment you can make in a relationship that is, which is
Mhm.
always going to be the Lord.
Yeah.
But even to your point, like friends, like female friendships, whatever have you, things that are going to last a lot longer than that relationship you already know isn't going to last longer.
Right.
And so I love that you said that. I think too, if every girl is really honest. And again, I'm not talking about abusive relationships where guys are incredibly smart at manipulating.
Yeah.
I'm not
Where the
talking about that.
psychology comes into
Yeah.
play.
I think it's like it's the guy that we always say guys are stupid. Like that kind of guy.
Yeah.
It's like we excuse them from bad behavior because it's like guys know nothing. But that's an interesting front too. But I think at the crux of it, like girls in those kind of relationships, they do want it forever. And
Yeah.
that is what they want, whether that they would say that or not. But I'm curious to your point on settling, can a girl be asking for too much? I feel like that's the big fear is like, I'm someone that requires too much and I just need to chill out and let things take its course. God's got it. Christians can put a prayer on that all day. Like, I don't need to have standards. God's got it. Like, I need to settle down. But what does asking for too much look like?
I love that question, because I can think of two examples right off the bat. Whenever I was in high school, I had my best friend. Her name was Bailey. I had my first kiss in seventh grade. Okay. She, yeah, I was early. I had daddy issues. She had her first kiss with the same guy, but she was 17. So a junior in high school.
Wow.
And, when I was in high school and I did not understand Bailey, I was like, girl, you are crazy. Your standards are too high, blah, 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 blah. And I gave her a hard time about it. And honestly think I was jealous. I think I was like, man, I wish my standards were higher. I wish I didn't want the attention that these guys, whatever. Bailey's married with a son and she's happy and everything's fine. And I'm like, man, it all worked out. And she had her high standards that whole time throughout college. We lived together for our first year of college and she just kept her standards really high. Now, I was always told, so that was just one example that made me think of. And then the other thing is, so this is in the book, but I was always told that I was too much. That was just such a label on my life and almost like a word curse from my family. And they would just be like, oh, she's a handful, whatever. And it really hurt my heart. Well, going into relationships, because of that being kind of a label, I would try and shrink down and I would try and be less. Well, because of that, I think that added to the little settling here and there of accepting behavior that I didn't deserve. Then I ended up in this abusive relationship. Okay. At the end of that relationship, I was like, I'm done being less. I am going to be the full version of myself. I am going to be exactly who I want to be. And I'm done, basically. Then, so I go through this like 6-month intense healing process and end up on a date with the guy. And I was like, hey, I just want you to know I'm not here to waste time. And like, I'm here, like, we're going to figure out if we're compatible or not, period, whatever. And he's like, okay.
All right. What are your
He's
questions?
like, okay.
I love this. Get the non-negotiables ready.
Yeah, I lay it all out there. We go on probably like 4 or 5 dates within 2 weeks. One of those, like, a few days I was out of town. So that tells you like how much time we spent together. After 2 weeks, I was like, hey, if we're like kissing or making out, we're dating. Like, I'm not doing this boyfriend privileges without the title or the commitment. So you just tell me right now if you're in or not.
Wow. Let's
And
freaking
he's like, can I call you this afternoon? And I was like, yeah. But this was like literally 2 weeks in. Okay. So I'm like, whatever. I mean, I just laid it out there. On the inside was like, oh my gosh, this guy is so hot. Like, please don't leave. I just really hope that he stays. But on the outside, I was like, no, I'm going to stand my ground. I'm going to be all of me and I'm not wasting my time again. I'm not ending up in another boo-boo relationship. Fast forward 10 years later, we are now married.
I was gonna say, please tell me that guy's your husband. Please tell me that guy's your husband.
One child and one on the way. So the fullness, when I was able to show up in my fullness and be like, no, these are my standards. These are my standards. And look, I will admit I was challenging him, but guess what? He rose to the occasion every single time. And he would say that he was a BooBoo Dude, in his past, but he was challenged and changed immediately by my walk with the Lord, was able to be like, no, that's the kind of wife that I want. That's not the kind of fling I want. That's the kind of wife I want. So I'm going to rise up. I'm going to accept this challenge. I do not want to let this girl go.
That's good.
All of that to say, I probably once upon a time would say, yeah, maybe you can be too much. Maybe your standards can be too high. And now I would say, absolutely not.
I love that.
Absolutely not.
So I literally posted a reel the other day about being too much, because same thing. My whole family's like, I've always been told I'm way too much, too loud, too whatever, and too like animated. And it was something that I subconsciously internalized, because when I was little, like in 6th grade, middle school, I was actually really shy. And then I like broke out of my shell, and they say I've like never shut up since. But it's funny because I'm like, okay, so when I was little, I was too shy, but then I'm too loud. So what is it then? Like, what's the right amount? And what was crazy was actually the Bible Project. So I was looking into this word miod, which you might know this, but like in Hebrew, like in the Bible Project, whenever someone's like really something, like really sad or really poor, they go miod poor or miod whatever. But the Hebrew translation of miod is actually, it means muchness. And what's so crazy about it is like the context of it is like we're actually called to bring our muchness to God.
Yeah.
And so to think that like all the while we think we're too much, it's like, no, we are never too much for God. We're called to just bring that and reflect that back to him.
Yeah.
And when you set a standard, knowing who you are in Christ, it gives you the strength to hold to that standard.
Yeah. Love
And
that.
to understand like he's with you at all times throughout that. And I'm curious for you, because I know I can so relate to this. And I do feel like I want to hone in here for a second, because I think this is where a lot of girls can get, especially well-meaning, like Christians wanting to date. They have standards and then they make a mistake or they fall short or they do something that, doesn't like they lower their standards for just a little bit and then they feel shame and they almost feel like I'm not good enough to have that standard anymore because I blew it that one time. I sent that text I shouldn't have. I did that thing with that guy I shouldn't have. I was in that relationship for way longer than I should have. I got back together with him. And so they lower their standard, not necessarily because they want to, but because they don't feel good enough to keep that standard anymore because they fell short of it, of their own standard. It wasn't somebody fell short of their standard. It was they fell short of their own. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like what grace looks like in that situation? And is it true that like, if you fall short of a standard you set for yourself, you can't set that standard again because then you'd be a hypocrite? Like, what does that look like?
Oh my gosh. So I was absolutely soaked in shame whenever the abusive relationship ended. I mean, I could not look anyone in the eye because I just knew that I had blown it on all fronts. Anything that the Lord wanted me to do was totally in the trash. All of the standards I had set were probably just totally disregarded. And I felt like I had brought shame on other people too. Like, anyway, so I go the first place that I know to go whenever I can finally peel myself out of bed and, put on deodorant after like a week of just rotting. I was like, I'm just going to go to church because maybe there's something like, I don't know. I was just like, I'm just going to try to go to church. So I go to church and I was like, I'm just going to start over completely with everything. I'm going to start over with my faith. I'm going to start over with dating. I'm going to start over with everything. So I closed my eyes and I just imagined, and I was like, God, where are you? And I just imagined the throne room of grace. And it was beautiful and vibrant and wonderful and perfect, obviously. And I just saw God and Jesus and angels like in front of me. This was all in my head. This was all imagination. It just was visually praying is what was happening. And I was like, okay, I just need to reintroduce myself to you. So I stuck out my hand and I said, hey, I'm Ainsley. And what I realized, and this is all again visual, but I had this like cloak of shame and it almost looked like a towel of dirt and dust and just lint, I guess. And it was like a cape of shame. And he untied it from my neck and let it fall to the ground. And then I had this like halo floating above my head of like shrapnel and debris and like sharp objects and just sin. And he took it off of my head and replaced it with like this shiny gold one. And he's like, I know who you are.
Wow.
You are my daughter. And from that point on, I was like, there is no shame. There is no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. There is nothing that I cannot overcome, no rumor, no slander, nothing, because the number one person who I need to serve in this life has just forgiven me and given me a new name that was already mine, but he reminded me of my identity in him, and no one will take that away from me again. And so all of that to say, the miracle removing shame, because it is so hard, is found in the throne room and is found in your renewed and your concrete identity in the Lord. And he is so ready and willing to redefine that for whoever's looking. Like if you have a question of who you are, the Lord has an answer.
Mhm.
If you're wondering if you are too far gone, the Lord has an answer for you. And it is going to be one of comfort, of love, of restoration, and of kindness. And if you need proof of that, read the Bible.
Wow. Wow.
Because there are stories after story after
That's so good.
story of proof that that's the God he is.
Yeah.
And in the second that you think that my stuff is too big for him to forgive,
Mhm.
is the second that you diminish what was done on the cross.
Wow. That's so good. That's so good. I want everybody to go back and listen to that again because that even ministers so much. Like, I think about in my life, like, regardless if it's you're talking about a relationship or just like sins as a
Yeah.
Christian, like every day when you sin, when you tell a little lie, when you do a little thing, I think sometimes we feel like because we love God and because we want to honor God, we're shocked when we sin or make a
Yeah.
mistake. And we think it's like,
Yeah.
oh, his grace is only sufficient for those that never followed it, like the prodigal son, the ones that never followed him in the first place. And then, no, but there was another son in that story. There was
Yeah.
one that was always there, and the father's grace was sufficient for that son too. That
Yeah.
was with him the entire time and made the mistake of like falling into greed and ego and saying, why does he get this and I don't get this? It's like, God's grace is sufficient for all, whether you fall down and mess up when you're trying to love him or you're actively disobeying him, even though you know what he's telling you to do or not. And I think what's so powerful too about the whole concept of a BooBoo Dude, like you said, it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Regardless if it's someone, like you said, it's a level 2 BooBoo Dude or a more abusive relationship like those that we saw. We were talking about It Ends With Us, like that movie, and we were talking about that before. And I think this message that you give, what's so powerful about it is like the principles are so universal, regardless of the degree to which the situation kind of
Yes.
sets front. And I'm
Exactly.
curious for you, like going back into, I do think I've never been in an abusive relationship, so I can't speak to that. And I say that humbly.
Praise God.
When it truly, when it comes to, I think shame is, from what I hear, is a huge component about like
Mhm.
staying, or even like for those that have not been in an abusive relationship, but they've just been in the BooBoo like fine relationships. It's shame. It's I don't feel good enough to be on my own, or I don't feel good enough that I'm ever going to find anybody that is this somewhat fine and hits this somewhat standard. What is the worst thing you can do when you're in a shame spiral? When you're in that storytelling mode of shame after shame after shame, I'm not good enough. There's never going to be anyone better. I can't get out of this. What's the worst thing you could be doing?
Isolating. That is the number one tactic that abusers use. And that is the number one thing that the enemy uses as well, and tries to distract and isolate. So if you are distracting with unhealthy coping mechanisms, or if you are isolating by, disengaging in your community, not texting your friends back, and not going to church, or, staying involved in your faith community, then you are going to suffocate. And I'm saying that as someone who has suffocated and come back to life and been resuscitated. If you isolate and if you distract, you will go into this echo chamber of lies in your own mind, and you will just stay in that spiral, kind of like a gumball that goes all the way down but never
Yeah.
can find that exit. That is I believe that is the most dangerous place that you can be. There are resources if it's, on that dangerous end of the spectrum. There are reach out to and email or direct message me, because we need to get you out of there. But even in those beginning stages, get into community and get out of that isolation, get into a healthy atmosphere, because you need people to speak life over you,
Mhm.
and you need people who are going to encourage you along the way. Now, this is the thing about the title, and this is why it's called that, because when people isolate, it's very hard for them to understand other people say, hey, you're not in a good place, you're not in a good relationship, whatever. So that's why BooBoo Dude is even a phrase, because it's a light way to have a heavy conversation. Anytime I would talk to a girl who was in this relationship that wasn't good, she would be like, he just hasn't texted me back in like 3 days. And the last thing that we talked about was like, I sent him nudes. And I was like, girl, that's BooBoo.
That's
So instead of me saying, wow, that is really unhealthy. And that's like, let's get out of it. Instead of being like that, it lightens up the conversation. So it's a more approachable conversation
So
where
good.
it keeps our guards down, it keeps the conversation flowing, and it keeps the isolation at bay. Because
Yeah,
the last thing that somebody else needs is rejection from the people who are safe people. I hope all of
that's
that made sense.
that is, but that's so real. And I think too, like even like knowing myself, I'm such an internalizer. And if
Hmm.
I think I'm in a situation, whether it, like for me, it's the other day, someone was questioning like my decision on like a business opportunity. And initially, and their intentions were so good and it was a great conversation. But at first, my guards went up because I was like,
Yeah,
are you questioning my judgment? Like, are you saying I don't know how to make a good decision? And when you become defensive, you naturally draw towards the people that are in the situation that agree with what you're doing, which
exactly.
when it's a BooBoo Dude, it's the BooBoo Dude because
Exactly.
he's the one that is the situation. And
Mhm.
so all that to say, like, I think that is so powerful. I think that's also, I don't know why this came to mind, but when my sister, she had a dog. And anyways, long story short, sweetest dog in the world. And I remember when that dog passed away, she was really suffering from like the dog dying. And someone told her, she was like, Lizzie, love does not subtract, it only multiplies. And so if
Mm,
you want to get another dog, it's not going to subtract your love from Pooches, the last dog. But I don't know why that came to mind, but it just made me think it's like when someone, whether it's a girlfriend or like in your friend group, or it is a guy you want to date or whatever have you, love will only multiply. Love is not going to think like, oh, if you hang out with that group, it's taking time away from me.
yeah.
Or because I see this all the time, especially in college relationships, they start to live only in the walls of the apartment complex
Yeah.
or the dorm room. And they no longer go to the small groups. They no longer go to, and it's just because it's like, we can't let anybody in this. It's just us. But that's not what real love does. It only
Right.
expands. So Ainsley, I feel like I could talk to you forever. I know we're over time. You are like, but this is so helpful. And like, especially for girls, no one talks about this in the Christian world with dating, like
Yeah.
practical ways to identify and to date and to have high standards, like permission to do that. I'm just so grateful for what you're doing and the light you're shining because like relationships have, I mean, the most important influence on your life, your relationship with your
Totally.
Heavenly Father, with yourself, and with
Absolutely.
your partner.
Yeah.
So thank you for what you're doing. Where can people find you? Because they're going to stalk you after this.
Yeah. So Don't Date a BooBoo Dude is available anywhere books are sold, Amazon, all those places. The Enneagram for Teens is my second book that's out in the world now.
Yes.
I am on Instagram at Ainsley B, and my website is ainsleybritain.com. And I can't think of anything else that's important, but
That's all
I
that
do have
matters.
a free Don't Date a BooBoo Dude quiz on my website. So
I know. I love that. And I'm going to have you back on for the Enneagram for teens because I love the Enneagram. I'm a 3 wing 2.
yay.
Hey, what are you? I'm curious.
I'm a 2 wing 3.
Nice. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I want to talk about that because I love the Enneagram, but I also just love like your platform in general. Again, you have so much joy and so much light, and like you're pointing people back to their creator that's with them at all times from your space of
Absolutely.
creation in the social media world. So thank you for what you do, and just thank you for your time and being on the show today and shining your light.
Thank you. You're the best. And I just have loved this conversation. I agree. I feel like we could talk forever.
And I hope that this blessed you and encouraged you, reminded you that God gave you a unique light and it is your job to shine it in this world because we need you to. That being said, if you were blessed by this message and you can think of anybody else that also needs this type of encouragement, do me a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, leave me a comment. It helps me out a lot and helps this message that I do believe God gave my heart to share with the world gets out. I hope you have such an amazing rest of your day.